Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Okay, so here's our plan. We're going to, for the summer. Here's our plan for the summer. We're going to meet for the next 2 weeks. We're going to spend the next 2 weeks finishing the important pieces of Masechet Brachot, blessings, that we've been looking at, and today especially so. If you saw the post, we're really going to be looking at blessings. Then we'll finish Brachot, and according to the order of the Mishnah, we would continue through all the agricultural laws. But here's what I'm going to take a vacation at the end of July, a couple of weeks, last 2 weeks of July. So we'll take 2 weeks off. Yeah, I know. I'm so excited. Although, what am I going to do? I'm just going to sit by myself somewhere else. But I'm going to take a vacation, and then I'm going to come back in August and then we're going to continue, but we're going to jump to the next order of the Mishnah, Seder Moed, which means festivals. And we're going to start with Yom Kippur. Yoma is the name of the Masechet, Yom Kippur. And that'll be like our Mishnah class will continue, but we'll be also preparing for the high holidays. And Masechet Yoma in particular is a very vivid and I think really important way to prepare for the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur experience. I try to do it every year, just to read through Masechet Yoma. So I think it'll be great for us, and we'll spend August and part of September doing that. So that's the plan there. In terms of the plan for today, we are going to be talking about blessings, and I have this. I realized as I was, I flipped through the tractate, as I'm thinking what to bring for this week, and I realized that my plan here is not to look at every Mishnah, because some of them are not that interesting, but to go in order and look at the most interesting ones. But then there's you can get carried away and only looking at exceptional, very unusual, and I like that kind of learning. So I'm inclined to just bring the weirdest Mishnah of all. But the truth is, we would be one of the points of doing this kind of learning is that I really believe the Mishnah is foundational Jewish knowledge, foundational Jewish knowledge, and it's it really is the basis for becoming a well-educated. That's an overstatement. There are many ways to become a well-educated Jew, but a well-educated in what rabbinic Judaism has come to be. You start there. So we would be remiss if we went through Tractate Brachot and didn't actually study the real topic. We've been talking about prayer, because once you mention the way that this worked is it's an agricultural section of the Mishnah. Well, you make blessings over food, so blessings. Well, now that we're talking about blessings, let's just talk about prayer, and then it becomes the tractate on prayer, and that's very, very important. So we've been talking about that. But in chapter 6, we arrive at brachot, at actual blessings, which I suppose are a form of prayer. That's one of the things actually we can talk about. This first question to start thinking about: are blessings prayers? Right? That's something to think about. But we introduce this idea that you should make a blessing before you eat anything. And I gotta say, this is, if I don't say it before we finish, let me just say now, this is one of the best Jewish practices there is. If you don't do this, you should. It's just it's a great practice. It's one of the easiest and most profound spiritual practices that Judaism has to offer. But it's not clear where it comes from exactly. This is sort of our real introduction to rabbinic Judaism. We've been talking so far about, say, the Shema, right, or prayer. And it's true, the rabbis are now building a whole system around core Jewish practices like saying the Shema or praying. But this institution of saying a blessing before you eat, this feels like something new. This feels like, oh, this is legislation, right? This is not sourced in the Torah. Okay, now having said that, some of you probably know that there is a source in the Torah that speaks about blessing. So let's take a look at that for just 1 second before we begin. Let's see if I can. 1 second. I'm last minute rearranging something because I decided I want to show you this first. Did not work. Where is it? Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I'm just going to show it to you anyway. So much for professionalism. All right. This is the source in Deuteronomy of the obligation to bless. Right? When we speak about blessing over food, when you have eaten, you will eat, and been satisfied, you'll be full, then you will bless the eternal your God for the land, or over the land, the good land that God has given you. Now, in some ways, it couldn't be any more explicit than that, right? Where am I? Where am I, people? I'm totally lost. Oh, here we are. Okay. My Zoom's not working very well today. I apologize. Okay, couldn't be more explicit than that. You have to bless on food. Okay. What though is what does that look like? Somebody just read the verse. Ve'achalta v'savata uverachta. You eat, you feel satisfied, you bless. What's that look like? When do you say benching? A blessing? What's that?
Afterwards. Benching.
That's right. That's benching. That's benching. It's what we call benching. It's the Yiddish for to bless. And as Joe says, afterwards. Birkat hamazon, the grace we say after meals, borrowing from I don't know, American Christianity. Grace after meals. The benching. Okay, that is a biblical commandment. This, what we're about to talk about today, is not a biblical commandment. It is a rabbinic, you might say, takana, legislation, introduction. And it's a different kind of blessing. Now, what is the purpose of saying a blessing after you eat? Why? You eat and then you get full and then you bless God. Why?
It's kind of easy to forget to bless God when you're satisfied and you have no need.
Okay, so that's why you have to be told to do it. Yeah. Why is it good to bless God after you eat?
Gratitude?
Gratitude, correct. That is, and I say correct, you could give a lot of answers in a sort of a value sense, but correct in the sense that blessing is known as a blessing of thanks, right? Birkat hodaya, right? So that's a blessing, or hoda, a blessing of thanks. What we're going to talk about is a different category of blessings called birchot hanenin, the blessings that you make in order to enjoy something. Blessings in order to enjoy something. That is different than a blessing of thanks. Now, what does that mean? A blessing in order to enjoy something. So let me give you the source sheet for today. And the best justification I can give you is the one that the sages gave themselves. So here comes the source sheet, which I've already mangled, but it's fine. Okay. Here is in the Talmud, in this tractate. We have been moving through Masechet Brachot, and it isn't until the 6th chapter that we get to what we're going to look at today, this kind of opening, which should have opened the tractate. Ketzad mevarchim, how do you bless? Right? It's called blessing, so how do you bless? That should have been the first question. So once we get there, just like a little further on in the Talmud commenting on this, there is a kind of why do we have to bless at all, right? And that's that. I say that, and in some ways I'm describing the work of the Talmud, right? The Mishnah is in some ways telling you more about what you do, and the Talmud is busy trying to figure out why you do it, right? Vos and farvos, as they say. So this is in the Talmud. This is, why do we bless at all? And Rabbi Hanina bar Papa said, anyone who derives benefit from this, there's that word, kol hanene min haolam, anyone who derives benefit from this world without a blessing, it is as if he stole from God and the community of Israel. Okay, let's think about this. I'm going to take you through the midrash here. There's a little midrash to prove the point, although it's just a little beautiful midrash. But I want to hear you. Why would it be true that I need to say a blessing, or else I've stolen from God? That might be easier than, and also I've stolen from the community of Israel. Okay, so as it is stated, here's the proof text: whoever robs their father and mother and says it is no transgression, they are the companions of the destroyer. So somebody in Proverbs hates their parents. Okay, fine. So that's a proof text. Well, the phrase their father. Now, I just want to say, once you are in Proverbs, using proof text in Proverbs, you know that the rabbis are kind of out on a limb. This is not like this is not obvious from the Torah. As I said, they're justifying a practice they're instituting. The phrase their father refers to none other than God, right? It's like very gendered, but in this case, just part of a larger metaphor, so it's not as troubling to me. As it is stated, is God not your father who created you, who made you and established you? It says that in Deuteronomy. And then the phrase their mother refers to none other than the community of Israel. That is stated, hear my child, the discipline of your father, and do not forsake the Torah of your mother. Okay, so this is the reason, says Rabbi Hanina bar Papa, why we say blessings. So before we get to what they are, let's just try and figure out, what does it mean? Anyone who enjoys something in the world and doesn't say a blessing steals from God and from the community of Israel. Why? Either one. Yonatan.
Well, for stealing from God, it's about consent, right? So God created the world, and one of the first things God did was consented for us to use everything that was permitted. Everything except for things that are prohibited are permitted for use, and all we really have to do is ask permission, and this is our way of asking permission.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting language of consent, permission. Good. Okay, let's continue to build on that. Wendy?
I think this is really the practice of life. I think that all of what we do, what we're studying, we're constantly talking about being aware, being present, and blessings bring us into the moment of what is happening with us. I think that's one thing. And what is happening with us is because of God. We are here because we were created by God. And this practice is the practice that we're being asked to live is one of gratitude.
Okay, that's interesting. Because as you use the word gratitude, in some ways you take us to the justification for the after blessing, but you're not wrong. I think what you're saying, Wendy, is that the rabbis are encouraging us to be, as you said, first of all, present in the moment. I think that's certainly one of the functions of blessing, but to be grateful and aware of God's sustenance as you eat the food, right? As you're like in the process, not just afterwards, like, boy, that was good, but to bring that conscious, and in order to do that, you need to prepare to say it before. Yeah, that's very nice.
Yeah, but I was going to say, it's not even just after, it is before. It's every moment of it that we bless before and after, that this whole experience is a blessing.
Great. RBZ?
I was thinking that pausing for a minute and acknowledging where the nourishment is coming from and not rushing through the meal so there's no real major indigestion and everything else. And so we're feeding out of being rushed. And
Great.
Instead pausing and actually allowing the food to nurture our bodies and souls. Then we can thank afterwards. But until we take that pause and really allow it to do what, why we're eating.
That's cool. In your formulation, Rabbi Zaki, it's almost like the saying the blessing, whatever goes going on in your head, just going through an action will actually cause you to enjoy the food more, because you'll have paused, and that will actually produce a different, just take a moment in a sense. Okay. One more comment, and then I want to, from Nick, and I want to dive in. Remember, we're also trying to figure out, what does it mean that you'd be stealing from God or from the Jewish people, right? Nick.
Yeah, I think it's easy when we grow the food, when we pick the food, when we cook the food, like the royal we as human beings, and acknowledge this whole process and go through it, to become convinced that we're the ones who did it, that like we're the ones who made it. And I think that these blessings are a good reminder that we are not the ones who made it. We're the ones who are benefiting from the blessing, that is the abundance that we, at least, if we have access, that we are able to enjoy. And this makes me think of the waters at Meribah, like why was there such a harsh decree against Moses when he struck the rock twice? Because it seemed as if he was taking the credit away from God and ascribing that moment to his own power, saying like, I did this, which is what in my mind seems like a bit of a justification for why it turned on its head so quickly. So I think that these blessings are sort of, in my mind, have been like a pointing to that, and a reminding of ourselves that like, while we may be making these foods with our hands, we're not the ones who truly made it.
Okay, great. So this actually loops back to Yonatan's comment, because Yonatan suggests that the basic reason is that you acknowledge that God made the food, God gave the food, God created the possibility that we would have food, and we're allowed to partake of it, but almost the unit of exchange is acknowledging that, right? And Nick is saying, yes, because it is very easy to think, with food, it's very easy to think of yourself as the creator of the food. I mean, we do plant seeds and they do come out, and then we process it and we cook it. I mean, we do a lot. I always think it's a little funny, right? That there's this blessing, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. God is the one who brings forth bread from the earth. One of the obvious questions there is God does not bring bread forth from the earth, right? Like we have to process it to make bread. So what does that mean? And I think Nick's comments begin to give us, the sophisticated but in some ways obvious answer, which is that but it all comes from God ultimately, right? And you have to really stay conscious of that. Okay, let's take a look at the blessings. And I just want to say, because this is also basic kind of important Judaism 101 style information, that it's also worth noting that there are, this is good news, only six basic blessings. And the truth is that there are only 4 basic blessings, okay? The 4 basic blessings are they all start Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, right? Blessed are you, God, King of the world. And then there's Borei Pri Ha'etz. Blessed is the God who created the fruit of the tree. Borei Pri Ha'adama. Blessed is God who created the fruit of the ground. Shehakol niyeh bidvaro. Blessed is God that everything came from God's word. Right? Okay, we'll see. We're going to see all this in a second, but just so you can, if you're writing this down or just keeping track, and then Borei minei mizonot, the creator of the various species of grains or of sustaining things. We'll talk about that in a sec. And then those are the 4. That's really all you need to know on a daily basis. There is also hamotzi lechem min haaretz, and last one, Borei pri hagafen. Right? Blessed is the fruit of the vine, which you don't say over fruits of the vine. Okay, so let's take a look. But it's those 6. That's not too complicated. But let's see how it works. We're going to now look at Ketzad Mevarchin, beginning of a very famous and important chapter in the Talmud. Ketzad Mevarchin al haperot. How do they bless over fruit? And just note the language of the Mishnah here is very presumptive. There's some practice out there the rabbis are already doing. They're already into this. So how do they do it? How do you bless over fruit? Al peirot ha'ilan, over the fruit of the tree, omer borei pri ha'etz. You say, who creates the fruit of the tree? And now things, okay, interesting. But now things get more interesting. Chutz min hayayin, except for wine, over which one says, who creates the fruit of the vine? Okay, did you catch that? Wine is the one exception to fruit. Well, I don't even know why it would have been an exception to fruit. Okay, so we got. Let me just stack the questions as we go, and then we'll back up. First question: why are we talking about fruit first? That's not the primary food. Why are we talking about fruit? I don't even eat that much fruit. That's not the first thing I would think of. Then there's an exception to fruit, and it's wine. And then the thing that you say over wine is the fruit of the vine, but you say that for wine, not for fruits of the vine, like, I don't know, like grapes. Okay, so what's going on there? Then, al peirot haaretz, but on fruits of the earth, not clear what that is, fruit of the earth, fruit of the, yeah. Omer borei pri ha'adama, you say creates fruits of the ground. Okay. Except over bread, chutz min hapat, same move here. Chutz min hapat, she'al hapat hu omer hamotzi lechem min haaretz. But bread, an exception to fruits of the ground, which I don't even know what that is, you say hamotzi lechem min haaretz, the one who brings forth bread from the earth. And then ve'al hayirakot omer borei pri ha'adama. And then over vegetables, you say this same blessing, borei pri ha'adama. There's fruits of the earth, fruits of the tree, and then vegetables, and then, but that's 2 blessings total. And then you have wine and bread. Okay, and then finally, Rabbi Yehuda has a position which is not ultimately adopted, which is that vegetables have a different blessing. It's not borei pri ha'adama, but borei minei deshayim, the creator of all the types of herbs, grasses, sprouts, etc. Okay, so that's a lot of information right there. So let's slowly unpack it. Why start with fruit? What fruit? And not just start with fruit. It's kind of all about fruit. It's like this kind of fruit and this kind of fruit, and this is a vegetable's also a fruit. You know. So what's going on there, David?
Well, fruit. I'm trying to think of a good way to phrase, but it's there. It's not something that we have to, unlike bread and unlike wine, it's not something that involves collaboration. It's something like God has given us without any collaboration or anything like that, unlike bread and wine.
Ooh, I like that answer. Really like that answer. That's interesting. Fruit is clearly from God. It's a fully formed thing. Like, there it is. Nice. Other answers. Who else has got an answer? Just looking for, make sure. If folks, any folks want to jump in that I haven't seen yet? Okay. Who else has got an answer? See some people I have seen. Wendy, you got a hand up?
I actually have a question.
Oh.
So my question is, could it be that you asked about starting with the fruit from the tree? Was in Gan Eden, it's fruit from the tree that begins the good and evil. So this, I don't know if it's connected, but that's—
Oh my gosh. Okay. Boom, like explosion. Great, like brilliant comment there. And that's exactly right. On a simpler level, first of all, than Wendy is even saying, let's start just with the basics. Yes, that's right. Let's remember the beginning of the story of creation includes, on the 3rd day, includes the creation of all of the things that grow, and that's the food, right? Like that's the, God said, let the earth sprout vegetation. Vayomer Elohim tadshe haaretz deshe. Here's deshe, same language as these species of herbs, deshe. So that language is there. Esev mazria zera, that's the grasses or sprouts. And then eitz pri, ose pri lemino. And then the fruit trees with every kind of on earth that bear fruit with their seed in it, right? And it was so, the earth brought forth vegetation. So there's two words we have here, the deshe, the vegetation, and then the pri, the fruit. So that's right up at the outset. But as Wendy says, it's deeper than that, right? Because the fruit then becomes, here, let's click this for a second. It's the thing then that God says, I'm going to give you all the fruit to eat. It's the thing that we eat. It's the first thing that humans eat. It's like there's something really basic about this unit. And in fact, when we say perot, we could be speaking about fruit, but we could just be speaking about produce, the fruit of the earth, that which comes out of the ground. In a sense, all food, right? And then finally, as Wendy says, it's also the fruit that we not supposed to eat, that we do eat, that grants us knowledge, that becomes very, very, very important. So that seems like also very much a part of what's at stake here. Okay, great. So that's fruit. Anyone got further thoughts on fruit? Why fruit? What's up with fruit? I think the two comments we heard were very helpful. Now, what about wine? What's going on when they say, but not wine? Wine has its own blessing and it's fruit of the vine. What's the thinking there? I mean, there's an entire, there's an entire section of the Talmud that parses this all out, but I think we have the right also to just read the Mishnah and ask, well, what's going on there? Yeah, Nick, what's up?
I was just gonna say it's like a processing of the fruit. I feel like it's another moment of like being a good reminder, like, no, you didn't you may have made this product and but that doesn't mean that you mastered it. That doesn't mean that it came from you. So let's remind ourselves from where it came.
Okay, meaning because wine is processed fruit, you might think it's more you. I like this line of reasoning. Well, any other thoughts? Yeah, David.
Well, wine also is different. It can alter consciousness. So
right. Okay. So that's true. And again, an even simpler version of it is to say, well, wine's really special. We make meals over wine, and that's going to be the same explanation as bread. There are reasons why there are items which might evoke some of these other, I guess, more ontological considerations, like how do we relate to them as substances. But it's also like, these are the special foods that we use to make a meal. And so they have their own blessings. And in fact, those blessings will function as we know, in ceremonial ways and have special powers, so to speak. Like the blessing, Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, once it is said, it covers the whole meal. And you don't have to say any more blessings over the meal, right? The blessing, Borei Pri Hagafen, is incorporated into Kiddush. Okay. Okay, but there's other weird stuff going on here, and this, in some ways, is the sort of most confusing part of the Mishnah is that you have fruit of the trees, which is blessed is the fruit of the tree, fruit of the ground, which is blessed is the fruit of the ground, and then vegetables, which are also blessed is the fruit of the ground. So why have those two different categories? Why is it important to have two different categories? I truly don't know the answer to this question. Like, why not just have blessed is the not blessed is the fruit? That's Handmaid's Tale. Blessed is the maker of fruit, right? Like, why not just have that? And the Adama and this and that, and make sure we're like, what are you thinking there? What's the point of that? I'm gonna throw it back up on the screen so we see. Very, very precise, right? It's like, let's see, here it is. Yeah. Fruit of the tree, fruit of the ground. And by the way, they use a little bit different language. Their language is ilan, right? Because that's I guess it's Hebrew, but it's more the common usage in Aramaic, and also aretz and adama. But anyway, sorry, that's not that important. But yeah, all of these different kinds of fruit or different ways that fruit comes out of the ground. What's going on there? Any thoughts about that? Let's see if I can see who's in. I see Yonatan.
Yeah, I've got two thoughts about that. I think that the division between fruits of the ground and vegetables seems to be in there to reflect a controversy, right? That fruits of the ground, there's no controversy as to what they should be blessed for, but Rabbi Judah thinks that vegetables merit a different blessing. And that's kind of a shoddy reading. But I think there's something.
So you're saying what we're seeing here is them just trying to work out, well, what are the right blessings?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And preserving
kind of what's the best term for everything. Okay, that's good. What Yonatan is saying, and I think though I want to hear more discussion. That in a sense takes us immediately into the second. If you hear little beeps, I'm sorry, I'm having trouble charging my computer. That takes us right into the second Mishnah, and I think let's read this because that immediately takes our discussion into sort of a full into its fullness. Because we then hear in the second Mishnah, in terms of like how they function and which one you should use, that if one blessed over the fruit of the tree, the blessing who creates the fruit of the ground, one has fulfilled one's obligation. So you're eating an apple, but you say the blessing for a watermelon, that's okay. You say Borei Pri Adama, that's fine. But if one says over the produce of the ground, if you say for a watermelon who creates the fruit of the tree, one has not fulfilled one's obligation. And I could stop and ask you why that is, but just think for a minute and you could probably reason it out, right? Trees also do grow from the ground, technically, but watermelons do not grow from a tree, right? But then we've got this question, so why have a specific tree blessing, right? What's going on there? Why have a more specific and a less specific version of the tree blessings? Let's see. Let's make sure that I see who's up. Nick.
I mean, I think the language of Hadama, like, it just makes me think of like how Adam was created from the earth, like humankind was created from the earth. So I don't know, maybe there's something to that. And I don't know, I think maybe the differentiation between like the tree blessing when we're thinking about the Garden of Eden versus like the ground blessing when we're thinking about the creation of human beings is supposed to create some sort of maybe it's just like a means to sort of like remind us of that dichotomy. And it seems like trees have some sort of elevated spiritual quality that maybe, we have the tree of knowledge and the tree of life, and maybe it's just there to remind us of that, as maybe it's just like a learning tool. I don't know. I think
maybe that's interesting. Something special about a tree. Acknowledge that when you, right, because of all the things we've been saying about trees, acknowledge when you eat a fruit from a tree, that's like, you're basically Adam and Eve. That's like, whoa, like you're going all the way. So maybe you're actually supposed to evoke that more powerfully. Let's see, Yonatan.
One of the great things about these blessings, if you really stick to them, is that they serve as an interface between your body, your mind, and your soul. And having these rules forces you to really sort out and organize in your mind, what am I eating? Where did it come from? What's the chronology, the hierarchy? How do these foods relate to one another? And I think that's where the glory really lies in the details of these rules.
Okay, that's such an interesting comment because I think I resonate with it. There's something about blessings. It's about being really, what kind of food is, it's about being really aware of all of the diverse sources of sustenance and how they're different, and just appreciating the richness of life and of eating life. So that's a good reason to have different blessings. But then we've got this. That's one. What's one momentum in our blessing kind of development here in the Mishnah. But there's another tendency, which is that but some blessings can just cover other blessings. In other words, that pushes a little bit against, and I'll just make the case even stronger and introduce the most comprehensive blessing. This is the one that if you don't know any other blessing, you should know this because this will cover everything. And it's the one that I heard my father say so much growing up that I didn't know. The blessing is Shehakol Nieh Bidvaro, and I remember thinking it was Jaco Nibero or something like that because it was just like saying it so fast. So, oh, everything just froze. Are you still there? Yeah. Okay. So this is Shehakol Nieh Bidvaro, and take a look. It's whatever you can say the watermelon blessing over the apple blessing, but you can actually say if over anything. One says, by whose word all things exist. Magnificent blessing. Shehakol Nihyeh Bidvaro. Everything came to be through God's word. Right? I don't have to ask you why that is so. That's like a profound statement of theology, creation, the beginning of the Torah. God's word creates the world. Wow, that's huge. That's a huge blessing. And then once you have that blessing, what need do you have for any other blessing? In other words, I could start to push back on Yonatan and say, let's throw out all the other blessings. Everything was created through God's word. Okay, so you understand the question I'm asking? On the one hand, we have Yonatan's position, which is the more specific, the better. And then you've got this other idea that, yeah, but actually the big ones can just be used to cover everything. So I want to know what people think of that. Ruth had her hand up before I asked that question. Ruth, what were you thinking? Ruth, can you unmute yourself? And also, can we see your face if possible? Yeah, nice to see you, Ruth.
No. Don't we have to usually wait a few years until we're allowed to harvest from the tree? Are we allowed to eat the fruit that falls to the ground beforehand? And maybe it's because we have to wait so long, thank God we can finally eat the fruit of the tree.
Yeah, that's really nice. That's right. That's very, very nice. The whole idea, I was just talking about this with my cousin actually yesterday, because my cousins, in our family, we don't cut children's hair until they're 3 years old, because it's a following of, it's called an upshurin. And it's like, because every person is like a tree, and there's a commandment that you don't eat the fruit of a tree for the first 3 years. So you don't know, it's a beautiful tradition. But Ruth is also right that that's another kind of, well, hold on, not just immediately when the fruit grows, let the fruit be for a while. There's a lot of hold off, wait a minute. You don't just get immediate access to everything, kind of. There's that sort of theology you can find even in biblical commandments. Okay, so what about Shehakol? That everything, now I got the best blessing ever. I don't need any other blessings, right? I said that if you read my post, that Shalom Auslander writes us about a blessing bee that he participated in when he was in 3rd grade at Yeshiva Spring Valley. And you could say Shehakol for everything. You get away with everything. It's not actually true. You're supposed to say fruit of the tree for an apple. So why some things specific and some things general? And I guess, you hear what I'm saying. I don't really have a question. Hannah?
Yeah, and I don't know that I really have an answer, but one of the things I'm thinking about is accessibility. Like, if it feels so overwhelming to have all this minutia about, okay, usually you say this for fruit, but some of the fruit is not going to be this one, it's going to be this one, and then some of the vegetables. And so I wonder about, okay, you lay all of this framework out, and it's very Jewish. Like, there's a lot of rules and stuff, and a lot of exceptions. And then you say, and also, if that's too much, here's another option. You can say Shehakol. And that way, if you're too bogged down, it's better for you to say a blessing and to take a minute to understand what's happening and to borrow this moment from God and from God's land and space and whatever, as opposed to getting too overwhelmed in the details and not even taking a minute to do it at all because you can't figure out which blessing is the right one.
Yeah, great. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I love that, because what Hannah's doing so beautifully is in some ways reminding us of the opening gambit of the Mishnah. Remember, the first Mishnah we learned was you have to say the Shema by the 1/3 into the night or halfway into the night. That's the idea. But then we learned actually, but if you don't say it by that time, you can say it all night. And this seems to be a kind of a principle and why did they say they do that? Because it's in order to keep people away from sin, right? From not doing it at all. So there's a parallelism there. In that case, you can say the blessing all night, but it would be better to say it earlier. Here, you can say the blessing over everything, and we want to leave space for you to know one blessing, but it is better to say things more and more specific, at least for trees, right? Because as we'll soon see, the Shahakol blessing applies to all these other things. Over anything which does not grow from the earth, one says, Shahakol nieh bidvaro, by whose word all things exist. Over vinegar, fallen unripe fruit, and locusts, which by the way are kosher, not all of them, one says, by whose word all things exist. Over milk and cheese and eggs, one says, by whose word all things exist. In other words, it really is just about everything else, okay? Now, I should say, one of the blessings we're not gonna see in the Mishnah, which comes up in the Gemara, is borei minei mezonot, which that's a huge category too. All the grain food, like cereal and cookies and all of the things which are grainy but not bread, that's also there. So that's a vast territory of food, but not as vast as Shahakol. Shahakol is everything that doesn't grow out of the ground. Every animal product, right? Every processed food like vinegar. It's a lot of food. Okay. I don't even know where I was going with that. Jamie.
What was I going to say? I think the only thing that I can think of for why to have these distinctions, I don't think I'm saying anything new here, but it's just to keep in our mind the magic of each of these different processes, or the miraculousness of these different processes. So if we just had Shehakol, then we wouldn't we wouldn't be thinking about the miraculous process of the fact that there's just fruit hanging off of trees that we can just eat, and it's delicious and filled with sugary delight. And the same for the ground. And then I often think, about Borei Pri Hagafen and Hamotzi. Those are distinct because they bring in, what's it called? Like human processing. And there's some implied miraculousness of the fact that there is just a fruit on the vine or there's a grain coming out of the ground. And yet with our human ingenuity, we create these unbelievably delicious, transformative treats.
That's really nice because it's very, it's like very Talmudic to say, well, is it about specificity or is it about generality? But actually, what we've got here is various categories of blessings that maybe the rabbis are saying all of these types of awareness are valuable. There's the awareness of and we want to have a blessing that covers a certain amount of food that's just look at all of the variety, look, the wonder that just came out of God's word. That's great. But also we should have some blessings that are just about meditate on a fruit. My goodness, a fruit comes out of the ground and it's sugary goodness, right? Right? And then there are blessings, and this is really interesting the way you phrased it, that actually reflect a human process like wine or bread. And we sort of, as we say them, we thank God for it, but we're aware that we're thanking God for this in a little bit of a different way because part of what we're thanking God for is our own ingenuity and ability to create food. And that's when I say hamotzi lechem min haaretz, when I say brings forth bread from the earth, I'm acknowledging God, but I'm also saying bread takes a lot to get out of the earth, and that I'm sort of subtly also acknowledging that there's the whole human process, which we are also the creation of, right? So yeah, I like that schema. Any other thoughts on our sort of categories so far? Okay. Oh yeah, David.
The only other thought I had is that, well, we've all said about consciousness, about being conscious of what you're eating, and also the fact that there's an annual perennial aspect to the fruit and to the vegetables too, that's there, but it's also the healthiest way to eat. So I just thought I'd take note of that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
As humans more and more, and as my friends all become vegetarians, it's just, so I wanted to.
Yeah, that's a very deep thing you're saying, not just in itself, but also in the framework of the Torah. Because remember what we saw, that the thing that God initially grants us to eat is the fruits and the vegetables, right? Like it looks very much like we're supposed to be garden people. We're sort of supposed to be herbivores. And then kind of famously, we are granted permission once Noah saves all the animals to eat animals. But I think that there's a very strong case to be made that either it's not ideal to eat animals, it's some sort of concession, or, it's not primary. I've been thinking about this a lot myself lately. I'm not a philosophical vegetarian, although I may be an ethical one for reasons that have, there are many reasons why you could be an ethical vegetarian. But I do think that I've been thinking about only eating meat on Shabbat and holidays, because I think there's a strong case to be made that not just supposed to be eating meat all the time. Even if you believe in eating meat, it's like, it's special. It's a gift. Everything that we're talking about, it's like a privilege to be able to eat another animal's flesh. I mean, some people think, you can make a case against that, but you should really take these things. That's what blessings are all about, is just be aware of what a privilege it is. But anyway, back to David's point, yes, it could be then that fruits and vegetables are the basis, and that's the way we're actually most supposed to relate to the world, as a garden. Okay, last thought here. Just there was one we got the basics of the blessings, and we saw how they could be kind of concentric circles, right? Concentric, concentric. There's the shahakos, everything, and then adama, and then b'rei pri ha'etz in the middle, and then maybe even more in the middle is like wine, more specific things. And then we said that we haven't seen b'rei minei mezonot, but that's like the muffins blessing. But take a look at this. There's one last piece here in our third Mishnah that's just worth taking note of. It is not the operative law. Here we go. Over anything which does not grow from the earth, one says by whose shahakol. Right? Al chometz v'al hanovlot, over vinegar and fallen unripe fruit and locusts. It's a kind of an interesting category, and that's the one we're about to consider. By whose word all things exist. Over milk and cheese and eggs, one says shahakol niya bidvaro, or jako nibero, as I first learned it. But Rabbi Judah says, over anything which is cursed, kol shehu min klala, anything which is like a kind of like cursed food, ein mevarchin alav. You don't bless over it. The assumption that the commentators make, although we can play with this a little bit, is that he's talking about vinegar, unripe fruit, and locusts. Meaning, this is a debate when in a Mishnah, when the last line is "but Rabbi so and so says," then we assume that Rabbi so and so is disagreeing with the stam voice of the Mishnah, the basic voice of the Mishnah. So it is that Rabbi Judah is presumed to be saying, well, I agree with you about shahakol for all these things, but you don't make shahakol over vinegar. And in fact, you don't make anything at all, because there's something about vinegar, about locusts, that, yeah, we eat them, but there's something gross about those foods, or there's something symbolic. I don't know. What do you think of this? What does it mean to say we wouldn't make a blessing over certain kinds of food? Why not? I mean, it's funny too. It's like I like vinegar, but yeah, I get what he's saying. Like, it is astringent in a way that is so, unripe fruit though makes sense, right? Like, it's not the best food, so you don't make a blessing. Yeah, David, what do you think?
I just thought vinegar is it's what happens to wine when it goes bad.
Yeah. Nice. So, oh, very nice. So wine that sours, or fruit that's not there yet, or what was the other thing? So unripe fruit, vinegar, and and locusts, and things that are just gross. Although, I mean, I say that jokingly because the Torah allows certain kinds of locusts, and then they are technically allowed, but we say sort of like, oh, we've lost the tradition. I hear some Yemenites do still have the tradition. But also you do wonder whether by the rabbis' period, just as in our culture, they're just like, that's gross. Like, I don't know, Torah allows it, but yeah. Nick, what do you think?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just talking about the whole locust kosher thing last night with my sister and like meat alternatives. But like, I think it's kind of a bummer that there's this opinion of not saying a blessing over locust, because it's also like was a food of poverty. And I think that it's kind of sad to take that opportunity of saying a blessing over fruit away from people who maybe that's all they're eating.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? Yeah, Joe.
It's interesting that we're expected to bless the bad along with the good in other facets of life, but according to this argument, we wouldn't necessarily do that with food.
Joe, so brilliant. That's beautiful. We'll leave it on that thought, because we're going to head next time to all kinds of other blessings. This is like, we start with fruit and food, and then we start building, and that's what we'll do to finish out our study of brachot, with all these other blessings. And yes, famously, the Mishnah says you are obligated to bless on the bad as well as the good. That is probably why Rabbi Yehuda's position here is not considered the normative law. But I also, right, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, you're eating it, but it's cursed, and it's cursed in what way? I mean, we've been talking a lot about the Garden of Eden, and there are curses there too. But I do think one of the things that I think is interesting when I look at this last blessing is that it seemed to suggest something that doesn't end up being true, which is that the blessings would be a little bit of like an option rather than a full obligation. In other words, it is about creating consciousness and not enjoying things that you, right? Remember, the idea is like you would be stealing it if you were enjoying it without making a blessing, but that actually you could think, well, this food, this is not a great meal. Like, it's a microwave meal. I'm rushing, I did this yesterday. I'm rushing to eat a meal, right? Like, this is not a moment for a blessing. Now, I know that, of course, many of you would be like, what are you talking about? You're sustaining yourself, and that's the way the law goes as well. But it does feel there's a little bit of space that Rabbi Yehuda is giving for like looking at your food and evaluating it and thinking, okay, like, this is basic sustenance. This is a piece of fruit. This is different. And that's interesting. Like, that's, as I encourage you all to be mindful, to maybe consider taking on this practice, and I really do, there's lots of different ways to think about taking it on. And maybe one of those ways is to say, like, okay, I'm not going to be able to incorporate it into everything I do, but I love strawberries. And if I ever eat another strawberry without thanking God, I'll have stolen that strawberry. I love strawberries, you know? So I would use the little leniency that Rabbi Yehuda gives us just to say, okay, so there's some controversy about when you say blessings at all, but everybody agrees that you should say blessings over fruit that you really appreciate or food that you really appreciate. So that this I think is a homework for us, a lifetime homework. It's like, pick a blessing, you know, pick all the blessings, but maybe pick one if you're new to it. And let's end with a pop quiz. Okay, if I am eating an orange, what blessing do I say?
3.
8.
8. If I am eating, if I'm drinking a Diet Coke, what blessing do I say? Tehako. If I am eating a bowl of oatmeal, what blessing do I say?
Brahmi name is Zonot.
Oh, very good. Brahmi name is Zonot, right? I didn't cover that one. If I am eating a potato, what blessing do I say?
Adama.
Very good.
Very
If I am
Adama.
eating a piece of bread, what blessing do I say? And then what about if I'm drinking vermouth?
Yeah. Is it a wine?
Cool.
I don't
It's
know.
not a
Hooray,
wine.
Pri Hagafen. Anything that is
Really?
grape
Hagafen.
product based will also, like grape juice and wine, will also take the Beret Pri Hagafen. So you see, the blessing bee begins. Right? Now we're getting into competition. Okay, great. So lots to learn here, lots to figure out. There's a whole deep discussion of this all in the Talmud, so we could keep going. But I think now we know some of the basics and see where this very incredible practice first grew up in Jewish tradition. Okay, teaching tomorrow at noon, Parsha, and tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, Chassidus. Good to see you all. Have a good week. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
Right.
Shavua Tov. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Oh, Rabbi, quick question.
Yeah.
Can you make blessings on unkosher food?
No. That's the question does come up. Like if you had to feed yourself with treif, you should absolutely do so because you're like starving, but you don't make a blessing over it because it's not. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good
question.
to know.
Yeah. All right. Take care, everybody.